my brother said. You can't handle the farm alone. Dad trusted me with the keys. I let him keep them to the land I already bought from the bank. My name's Noah. I'm 32. And my brother has always believed he was born holding the keys, literal ones now, to our father's farm. And the invisible kind, he thought, opened every door that should have been mine. People call it the old Ray Monroe place. 210 acres of stubborn soil, an appealing white farmhouse with a porch that sags in the middle like a tired smile. Dad used to thump that porch rail with his knuckles before sunrise. Arit will knock once. Twice. Then he'd tuck his faded cap, the one with the mustard stain from a county fair hot dog, down over his brow, and step into the day like he was stepping into a promise. For as long as I remember, the promise was, work hard. Keep your word. Let the land teach you who you are. My brother Ethan heard a different promise. He was the golden child. Teachers adored him for his grin and his loud plans. Neighbors clapped him on the back. Dad forgave things that would have sunk me. I was the quiet one with a laptop and spreadsheets. The kid who charted rainfall in a notebook while Ethan borrowed Dad's truck and returned it with the tank flirting with empty. When people asked what we'd do with the place one day, I said we'd do whatever Dad wanted. Ethan said the future was his to manage. He said it lightly. But he meant it. In full. Dad died 6 months ago on a Tuesday. In the chair by the west window, where the light makes everything look softer. Even the bills. Heart. Quick. The house turned still except for the clock in the kitchen giving out a patient tick. It didn't deserve Leahy. After the funeral, the short winter afternoon bled into a long evening of casseroles and paper plates. Ethan showed up the next morning with his wife, Lena, and a smile that looked like a plan someone had drawn with a ruler. He spun Dad's key ring on his finger, the keys chiming against each other like they were happy to be in motion again. Look, he said, standing in the kitchen, where the coffee maker was still half full of yesterday's brew. You've been in the city doing whatever it is you do. I've been helping Dad run this place for years. Makes sense, I manage things. You can be a silent partner. I'll send you statements quarterly. I tried to swallow the bitterness in my throat and found it was shaped exactly like the word silent. I was a data analyst. I worked remote. I'd been the one who answered Dad's late-night calls about online invoices that wouldn't print, and the year the seed supplier switched to a portal that kept kicking his browser back to the login screen. But Ethan had visited twice a month and posted photos of his boots in our fields with captions about grit. So to him, that made him a farmer. Sure. I heard myself say. Whatever works. Lena's smile grew, like I had just signed a dotted line I hadn't seen. Ethan moved into the main house that week. He took pictures on the porch in Dad's rocking chair, like he had inherited posture, along with property. He wrote long posts about our family operation and crop rotations, and how he'd been mentored by the best, which wasn't untrue if you took mentored to mean stood near. A month later he bought a new F-350. Glossy black. As big as a promise he couldn't keep. And had E. Monroe Farms vinyl wrapped on the side in a font that made the gravel drive look like a showroom floor. He ordered furniture that looked like it belonged in a ranch catalog, leather couch, entre les lampes, to a dining table too wide for our narrow room, then carved the zero-turn mower down the lawn like he was etching his name into the grass. Even though the old mower worked fine, and the grass had never cared what name cut it. Meanwhile, I stayed 2 hours away in my apartment with the perpetually humming fridge, and the thin walls and the clock that didn't tick so much as it sighed. I kept going to my boring spreadsheet job, as Ethan called it. And I kept driving my worn Civic. And on Friday nights I still reached for my phone at 9 p.m. Because that's when Dad had used to text me. Weather says wind. Tie the south gate. Old habits last longer than people. 3 months in. The first call came in hot. Like it had been revving since dawn. So, property taxes are due, Ethan said, breathless, as if he had run from the barn to the phone. Your half is $8,400. I picked the phone away from my ear to look at it. Stupidly. Like the screen would offer a second price. I'll get you the money, I said. Because that's what you say, when there's a fire, first you throw water. Also, he added. Casual. We need a new tractor. Your share is $22,000. There was a silence long enough to hear the hum of my fridge. long enough to picture the mustard stain on Dad's cap and the way he'd touch it like a good luck coin before telling me. Gently. To breathe. Ethan. I asked. How much did you take from the farm account? That's operational expenses. He said too quickly. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. Dad had left $34,000 in that account. It was supposed to bridge seasons. Cover the lull between selling and planting. In my mind, line items flashed: the truck, the furniture, the mower. Operational. I'm sure if the operation was a parade. I hung up as politely as I could and sat at the table with my laptop open and my knuckles white against the edge. For the longest time, I had kept something quiet. The way you keep a matchbook in a drawer harmless. Until the day you need light. Before I ever thought of striking it, the past stepped in to explain the present. Because it always does. The pattern had been printing itself for years. There was the baler incident. Dad had a buyer lined up for square bales that summer. Steady cash, if we got the timing right. A week before cutting, Ethan borrowed the baler to help a friend just for a day. He returned it with a belt chewed half through. It squeaked like that before, he said. Hands up in apology that looked like a shrug. We paid $650 for a rush belt and lost the buyer when we missed the window. Dad didn't yell. He never did. He just touched the mustard stain on his cap and told me, "What matters is, we fix it." There was the time Dad couldn't find the spare title to the old grain truck. Ethan said he'd filed it somewhere safe. Weeks later, the bank stalled a line of credit because that somewhere safe turned out to be the back pocket of a pair of jeans that went through the wash. We paid $120 for a replacement, and lost 3 days of planting weather, fighting the paperwork. It's just a hiccup, Ethan had said. Could happen to anyone. It kept happening to him. And there was the fair auction 2 summers before Dad's heart showed its temper. Ethan waved his bitter paddle like the county owed him applause. He bought a set of corral panels we didn't need, because they were a steal. Then insisted that Dad should be reimbursed from the farm account. It's an investment, he said. The panels sat behind the barn. Still banded. Silver going dull under weather. $875 turned into lawn art. 3 incidents. 3 small fires. I should have known. I tell myself now. But in the moment, each one felt like an isolated ember. Not a map of where the flames wanted to run. The will had said 50-50 on remaining assets. People read that line like it was simple math. They didn't know how debts and deeds and the quiet agreements between banks and families weave together underground like roots, holding more than you think until a storm tests them. I had learned that the hard way 4 years earlier. When Dad called me on a Thursday, voice thin from the hospital. Medical bills are stacked like hay bales, he said. I'm late on the mortgage. Don't tell your brother. He'll just worry, your mother. Let me get through the season. He still called my late mother your mother. Like she might walk in and refill his coffee. I said okay then. I told him I'd look into some options. And I did. I kept my word in a way that doesn't make for good porch talk. You can't snap a picture of a spreadsheet and get 1,000 likes. You can't pose beside a document that says secured and watch 100 neighbors type hearts. Quiet things don't travel far. But they hold. Now the quiet was done. Ethan's truck payments screamed louder than the cicadas. And the statements he promised to send never landed anywhere near my inbox. He talked about managing while mistaking motion for progress. He spun Dad's keys on his finger and didn't see how they were only heavy when you knew what each notch meant. A barn key is just metal if you've never stood in that winter dark and felt how long it takes a single bulb to warm up to the job of being light. 2 weeks after the taxes call, he rang again. And I could tell from the way he cleared his throat that his plan had slid into a ditch. Hey. So, I'm looking at some financing options for spring planting, he said. Bank needs both our signatures since we're co-owners. Can you come down this weekend? Can't. Work thing, I said. Stacking papers. I didn't need to stack. Just to hear the order they made. Come on. Man. This is important. We need to get seed orders in. He was right, the calendar doesn't pause for feelings. I'll think about it, I said. He huffed. Sound as practiced as his smile. You know, I'm doing all the actual work here. Least you could do is show up when I need you. You're right, I said. And I felt a hinge move inside me. I'll make time. That Saturday I drove down early, the Civic buzzing like an insect against the long highway. The house looked the same from the road, but different up close. The new furniture sat there like a stage set waiting for actors who didn't know their lines. On the kitchen table, Ethan had arranged papers in neat stacks. Lena made coffee with intentional clatter. It all felt rehearsed. Okay, he said, sliding into a seat. So here's the plan. He pointed at a printout that called itself a spreadsheet, my first clue it wasn't. I'm thinking we expand into organic soybeans. Premium market. I've been watching videos. Talking to guys. Dad had grown corn and wheat for 40 years, because he knew our soil like he knew the backs of his hands, the nick by the thumb from a fence staple. The slice near the knuckle from a dull knife. He knew the low patch that drinks too much. The slope that lies to the sun. The farm could change. I'm sure. But it never liked being told to do it fast. How much I asked. $60,000 to get certified. Cover conversion costs. A few pieces of equipment. He said. We'll make it back in 2 seasons. Guaranteed. The word guaranteed hung there like a balloon you know will pop, but you still flinch when it does. I looked at the papers. Ethan. You've been taking a salary from the farm account. He sat up straighter. Yeah. $4,000 a month. That's fair for management. That's $48,000 a year. I said. Dad cleared 30 most years after expenses. I have expertise. He said. And he didn't blink. That's worth something. I pulled out my phone. Not because I needed it. But because the quiet things I had done lived there in emails and confirmations and scanned copies. The matchbook in the drawer. Before we talk about loans, I said. I need to tell you something. Lena's smile tightened at the edges. Like she could sense a draft from a door I was about to open. Ethan's fingers drifted toward the keyring. And for a second, the little ring of metal looked heavy enough to tip him over. I should have known the moment would feel like this still. But tilted like the porch. When one of the old boards gives a little under your heel. I had hope ridiculous. Maybe in that thin space before the truth lands. Hope that he would listen. I hope that all the years of I've got this would soften into we for once. Hope that the mustard-stained cap wasn't the only inheritance we shared. But the wind was starting to come up from the south. And a storm was gathering behind the tree line. And some doors. Once opened. Don't close with the same sound. Lena set a mug in front of me. Then rested both palms on the counter, the way people do when they're bracing. Ethan tapped the edge of his spreadsheet with a pen like he was trying to conduct an orchestra that hadn't arrived. Say your piece? He said. Impatience wrapped in politeness. You remember 4 years ago? I began. When Dad's medical bills started stacking up. When the hospital kept sending new envelopes, even after the other ones were still sealed on the kitchen table. Ethan's eyes flicked to the window. Then back. He was fine. We made it work. He wasn't fine. I said quietly. He was late on the mortgage 3 months in a row. He called me from the hospital and asked me not to tell you. He wanted you to focus on getting the seed in. Ethan's pen paused. Lena didn't move. But I could see the muscles in her jaw go tight. I went to the bank. I continued. Not the counter. Upstairs. Loan officer. Escrow clerk. The person who reads the footnotes of documents for fun. I asked about options. There was one that would keep the farm safe without dragging Dad into a refinance he didn't understand. Ethan laughed once. Short. As if to bat the idea away. You don't know anything about farm loans. I know more than the Facebook posts you've been writing. I said. Still even. I offered to purchase the mortgage from the bank. An assignment. It's a thing they do when someone wants to take over the debt with better terms and a reliable payment schedule. And the bank wants a file off its desk. I paid $240,000 to acquire it. I've been making the payments since. Every month. On time. The coffee maker clicked as the burner cycled. A small domestic sound that made everything else feel bigger. Ethan's fingers left the pen and found the key ring. What are you talking about? He asked. But his voice had lost its flat certainty. It had edges now. I opened my phone. Scrolled to a folder I had named with a date, only I would remember. And put the device on the table. Screen, toward him. The deed chain. The assignment document. The payment ledger. Email from the bank's counsel. Dry as unbuttered toast, but unmistakable. The last confirmation. Final principal satisfied. Lien release. Recorded. That knew. I said. He wanted to pay me back. But the seasons never lined up the way he prayed they would. So he did what he could do. Which was keep working and stop worrying. When the will says 50-50 of remaining assets, it means what's left after debts are settled. The debt was with me. Ethan flipped through the screenshots like they might dissolve into something friendlier if he turned them fast enough. His face went through a small storm heat. Then color. Then a kind of pale that looked like exhaustion without the sleep. That's not. You can't, he swallowed. So what are you saying? Exactly. That the farm is yours. The land title moved when the mortgage was satisfied under the terms of the assignment, I said. There's a recorded lien release and a deed note referencing the transfer. The bank's records match mine. Dad's lawyer has the file. It's not a trick. It's just paperwork that took a long time and a lot of quiet. Lena found her voice. This is unethical, she said. Eyes sharp. He thought he still had control. He had a roof, I said, keeping my tone measured. He had a field to walk at sunset and a chair by the west window. He had enough time to make it to another spring. That was the point. He didn't want Eddie wondering if he'd lost everything he'd built. He didn't. He died at home. Silence settled. Birds ticked across the porch rail outside. Their wings quick and efficient. The smell of coffee felt suddenly too strong. Ethan set the phone down very carefully. I've been managing, he said. As if testing whether the word still meant anything. I've been here. I kept things moving. You've been here. I agreed. But you haven't been managing. You've been spending. The farm account had $34,000 in it. You burned most of it on a truck and furniture and a mower that cuts more grass than we grow. You started paying yourself $4,000 a month because the word manager felt good in your mouth. Dad cleared $30,000 a year on an average year. You tipped the balance with your imagination. His jaw tightened. I was investing. The business needs to look like a business. It needs to be a business, I said. The fields don't care what the logo looks like on the door. They care if we pick the right day to plant and don't drive the tires into the low patch after a night rain. Ethan looked at his stacks of paper. At the columns of numbers that didn't admit what they were made of. You could have told me, he said finally. You should have told me. I did tell you things, I said. Like not to spend from that account until we had a plan. Like to send statements if you were going to call me a partner. But the bigger truth, no. I didn't lead with that. Because I wanted to see what you'd do if you thought the land would love you back without being careful with it. Lena straightened. We can sue, she said. Voice crisp now. There are principles here. For what I asked. And I let a small tiredness into my voice. For me keeping this place from being sold at auction when Dad's heart and money couldn't run at the same speed, for me not correcting your assumptions when you walked in and decided that visiting twice a month made you a farmer, I have 4 years of cancelled checks. The bank knew. Dad Slavier knew. The county clerk stamped the pages. A judge isn't going to turn any of that into something it isn't. Ethan took a breath like he was about to say my name, and then didn't. He stared at the organic soybeans line item, like it might regroup and fight on its own. The room made a soft complaint as the furnace kicked on, and a floorboard thought about being 50 years old. Okay, he said finally. The word, the size of a tablespoon. If this is the reality. What happens now? This is what happens, I said. I slid a single sheet from my folder. Not to dramatize it. But because I had learned that clarity needs paper. If you want to stay and farm properly by the book. With records. With respect for the dirt under your boots, then it's a lease. $2,000 a month. We put the terms in writing. We agree on a crop plan that the soil will actually tolerate. We split profits after expenses proportionally to labor and risk. Not ego. Lena blinked. A lease. On the house we're living in. On the house Dad lived in and paid for with his hands. I said. On the barns and the bins. That's how people do it when they don't want to confuse family and business until they can't tell where one ends and the other starts. Or, I added. Because the choice needed to be named. And you move out by the end of the month. The end of the month, Ethan repeated. As if the words were new in the language. Where are we supposed to go? You're resourceful, I said. And I meant it without sting. You figured out a way to make the place look like a brochure. You can figure out this. He rubbed his forehead like he could erase lines he hadn't noticed forming. What about spring planting? He asked. A last angle. You really want to miss the window over paperwork? I looked at him and saw not a villain, but a man who had mistaken attention for care. We'll plant, I said. But we won't plant debt and call it seed. We'll set the plan by what the fields can stand after a winter of showing off to your friends online. There's a difference between speed and timing. He was quiet. Then the keys, he said. Voice soft, like he was asking them a question. He held up Dad's ring. Heavy with its little history barn. Shed. Grain truck. Side door with the sticky lock you have to lift as you turn. These mean something. They do, I said. They mean you can open doors you're responsible for. Keep them. He looked at me. Surprised. The locks are changed, I added. Not to keep you out forever. To make sure that when you come in, it's because we both agreed you should. Lena's eyes flashed. That's petty. No, I said. That's boundaries. We should have had them years ago. We didn't. So here we are. Ethan set the ring down. It made a sound on the table that traveled farther than I wanted it to. He stared at the soybean plan one more time and then folded the page slowly. As if by being careful, he could save the idea from breaking. He slid it into a pile that wasn't going anywhere. 2,000 a month. He repeated. Like he needed to hear it in his own voice. And a plan. In writing. In writing, I said. He nodded. Then nodded again. Like maybe the second nod would be the one that counted. I'll talk to Lena, he said. I'm right here, she replied. Cool as glass. I know, he said. And for the first time that day, there was something almost honest in the way he looked at her. They stepped onto the porch together, murmuring. And I sat alone with the cooling coffee and the faint smell of old wood. Out the window. The south field looked exactly like it always does in late winter, brown and impatient. A hawk held itself against the wind, the way only a practiced creature can neigh. I thought about Dad knocking the porch rail twice before dawn. About how he'd say, "Day's not gonna wait." He was right. It never does. I gathered the papers into my bag. Left the lease draft on the table under the mug, so it wouldn't flutter in the heat current from the vent. And stood. The floor gave that same forgiving creak it always gives. When I reached the door, Ethan and Lena were still talking low on the steps. I didn't need to hear. So much of this had been about listening to the wrong things. It was time to respect the quiet that counts. On my way to the car, I looked back once. Ethan was holding the key ring again. If not spinning it now. Just feeling the weight. He had no idea how heavy it really was. Maybe that's something you only learn by carrying it the boring way. Day after day. Without an audience, the Civic started on the first try. And faithful as ever, I pulled onto the gravel. In the rear view, the house got smaller. Then steadied. Like it was relieved to be what it had always been, a place that doesn't owe anyone a story. Just a roof to those who earn it. The road took me toward town. The wind came up from the south. And for the first time in months, the tightness in my chest loosened a notch. In the way a good knot yields when you tug it in the right direction. I drove home with the lease draft flapping in the passenger seat, like a bird that hadn't decided whether to fly or ride. By the time I reached my apartment, the day had settled into that tired gray that makes even clean dishes look like they need washing. I put the draft on my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and did the thing I trust when everything else is noise. I made a plan. First line item dates. It was the second week of March. If Ethan signed by March 20, we could order seed on early pricing. A schedule fertilizer delivery for the first warm window. And be ready the moment soil temps nudged past 50. If he didn't sign, I needed a path that didn't strand the ground in indecision. Dad had always said, uncertainty is the most expensive crop in the world. Second line people. I emailed Dad's lawyer. Hale. A compact man whose backside had memorized the shape of his chair. Subject: lease and notice timing. He called 10 minutes later. as if he'd been waiting for a bell. "Noah," he said. Voice like gravel packed tight. "You kept your powder dry a long time. You still ready to keep it that way?" "I'm ready to write it down," I said. "Two options. Lease by the 20th. Or vacate by month end." "Good," he said. "Send me the draft. I'll make it lawful instead of pretty." Third line, the bank. I called Miss Patel, who had shepherded the mortgage assignment like a careful crossing guard. She picked up on the third ring. "Noah," she said. "I was about to email you. I received a financing inquiry from your brother, Ethan Monroe, regarding spring operating funds. He listed the property as collateral." "He can't," I said. "Not without me." "He can't," she agreed. "Our system flagged it. We'll require both signatures on any lien. But you should know he's been shopping around. One out-of-county lender called to confirm ownership. I told them exactly what the record shows." "Thank you," I said. "If he asks. I'm not blocking planting. I'm blocking the kind of debt that thinks it's a shortcut." "We prefer crops to shortcuts," she said. And I could hear the smile in her voice. Fourth line, the field itself. I called Caroline the agronomist Dad trusted when he wanted a second opinion. She was the kind of person who could look at soil the way a doctor looks at a wrist. Then tell you, if the pulse was steady. "Organic soy." "Huh," she said, when I described Ethan's plan. "That's a 3-year conversion if you're doing it by the book. And the book has a lot of pages folks skip. Your ground can do it. But not on a dare." "I figured," I said. "If we go conventional this year, corn on the south, wheat on the north, what are we looking at? Seed will run you about $220 per bag for the hybrid that plays nice with your heat units," she said. "You'll need about 28 bags for the acres you're eyeballing. That's 6,160. Fertilizer. I call it $8,000 if you lock in this week. Diesel is the wild card. But budget $1,200 to get through planting. Timing matters more than any of those numbers. Plant a week late and you'll pay for it twice." I wrote every number down. Numbers don't argue, people do. By dusk, Hale had returned the lease with red lines that looked like a teacher grading a paper written by a student who thought commas were optional. "Deliver in person," he said. "And send a certified copy. That way when the porch gets loud, the paper can stay calm." The following morning, I drove back. The skies hung low like a ceiling had come down one floor. The driveway was lined with new tire ruts deep enough to hold a small pond. The F-350 gleamed at the end of them. The porch light was on, even though it was noon. Ethan opened the door before I knocked. He must have seen me through the front window. Dad had never bothered to fix the curtain on. Lena hovered behind him, arms crossed, chin set. "Got your lease," Ethan said. "We read it." And I kept my voice level. "It's insulting," he said. $2,000 a month, like we're some tenants you found in a classifieds listing. It's a fair number for the house. Barns, bins, and access," I said. "Below market. If you care to check. Also, it protects both of us. You get clarity. I get accountability." Lena spoke before he could. "What's the penalty if we pay late?" $50 after the 5th of the month," I said. "At 30 days late, it's a default. At 60, it voids." Ethan laughed once. "Short. You built failure into it." "No," I said. "Consequence. There's a difference." He looked past me at the yard. As if the yard might vote. "We need time." "You have time," I said. "Until the 20th to sign. Until the 31st to move if you won't. I brought a copy for you to keep. Certified copy will come in the mail." He took the envelope but didn't open it. "You changing locks, like some sheriff?" "I already changed the equipment padlocks," I said. "Barn remains open during the day. I'll give you keys when we sign. Until then, if you need something, call me. I'll meet you. It's not punishment. It's control." "Feels like punishment," he muttered. "That's because consequence and punishment both hurt at first," I said. "Only one keeps a roof over your head." On my way back to the car, I noticed the propane gauge and snapped a picture. 40%. I checked the diesel tank by the equipment shed 12 inches on the stick. Plenty to prep ground, but not enough to run a tractor on wishful thinking. I sent myself a text with both numbers. It's amazing how much steadier a mind feels when the facts have somewhere to sit. That night, a post bloomed on Ethan's page. A selfie on the porch. Lena behind him. Both of them serious. Caption: hard decisions ahead for the family farm. Pray we find a way that honors Dad. Comments multiplied. City boy shouldn't meddle. People forget who kept the lights on. We're with you, Ethan. A photo never shows the ledger fact. I didn't post. I drafted a message to 3 people who had earned the right to facts: Mrs. Dalton next door, who texts when the creek jumps the bank, Mr. Herrera, who buys our wheat when the price and moisture are both friendly, and Pastor Jim. Not because I wanted the pulpit, but because gossip travels through the same pipes as prayer requests. I wrote: lease offered. Planting will proceed with or without Ethan's signature. No auction. No foreclosure. Please correct rumors with that sentence. They all replied within an hour. Got it. Thank you. Facts are a gift. 2 days later. The first bill I hadn't expected found me, anyway, a past due notice from the co-op for $612. Sishasan. Dated the week Ethan ordered that antler lamp. I drove the printout to the farm. He met me halfway down the porch steps. What now? He asked. Co-op, I said, holding up the paper. $612.43. Fertilizer last fall for the wheat ground. Due last month. He frowned. I thought that was on auto draft. It wasn't. I said. I'll pay it. But starting now, anything for the land goes through me, or through the lease ledger. Otherwise, we get 2 realities and only 1 ground to hold them. I can pay it, he said stubbornly. You can pay me your half of the propane instead, I said, and showed him the photo from the gauge. Fill is $1.89 per gallon this week. Call it $400 for your warmth. I'll send a Venmo request. Paper trails aren't insults either. He stared at the photo like it had failed to be persuasive. You're turning this into receipts, he said. This has always been receipts, I said. We just didn't print them out. That evening, Hale called. Certified mail delivered, he said. Clock started. Also, county clerk flagged a filing attempt. Someone tried to record a UCC lien for equipment using the farm's address and your dad's old account number. Denied. Ethan, I asked. Name on it is a company I don't know, he said. But someone gave them something. Just watch the sheds. I drove out the next morning before sunup. Frost shimmered on the pasture, like misplaced glitter. The padlock sat where I'd left them. The door to the south shed held. The one with the sticky latch you have to lift while turning. Inside, the air smelled like oil and dust, and the metal version of old memories. The zero-turn mower looked smug in its corner. The older tractor eyed me like a dog who knows which of the 2 brothers refills the water trough. I checked serial numbers against Dad's list. He had taught me to keep it. People don't steal outright, he'd said. They borrow until you forget it was yours. The numbers matched. The relief I felt was disproportional, which told me my nerves had been working overtime. I stood in the doorway for a minute, hands in my pockets, and watched my breath make small clouds in the air. We're going to be okay, I told the tractor. Which is a ridiculous thing to tell a machine. But it steadied me to say it out loud. On the 18th, Ethan called. We need to talk, he said. The background sounded like the porch wind. A chair nudging wood. We can talk, I said. Are you ready to sign? I want changes, he said. 1. Reduce rent to $1,500 for the first 6 months. 2. I get discretion over crop choice. Counter, I said. We reduce to $1,800 for 3 months if you cut personal draws to 0 and provide weekly expense reports. Crop choices are joint, with Caroline's recommendation as tiebreaker. He exhaled. You always were a bureaucrat. I'm a farmer today, I said. I'm farming a plan. He was quiet long enough that I could hear the birds under the eaves. Fine, he said finally. Send the revised draft. I sent it. He didn't sign that night. Or the next. On the 20th at 4:43 p.m. My phone buzzed. DocuSign lease agreement E. Monroe. I opened it. Read every line even though I had written most of them. And watched the animation of his signature draw itself as if a pen were doing a slow, careful loop. I exhaled and didn't realize until then how shallowly I'd been breathing. I texted Caroline. We're greenlit. She replied with a shopping list that did not care about family drama: seed 28 bags, starter fertilizer 3 tons, micronutrient mix 400 pounds, test kit for soil 1, grease case. The next morning, I met Ethan at the co-op. He wore the cap he'd bought last month with the farm logo on it. I wore Dad's old cap with the mustard stain. We stood in front of a counter where prices have been chalked and erased since before either of us was born. Put it under Noah Monroe. I told the clerk. Account ending in 1472. Ethan opened his mouth. Then closed it. The clerk looked at us both. Then at the list. Then at the screen. We can have the seed by Friday. She said. Fertilizer truck on Monday if the road holds. Road will hold. I said. Because I needed at least one sentence today that didn't have a maybe in it. On the way out, Ethan stopped by the bulletin board where folks in the county pin notices for pancake breakfasts and lost dogs. He stared at a flyer for an equipment auction next month. We should pick up a used no-till drill. He said. Not this year. I replied. We'll rent from Herrera for $900. As discussed. Buying now would be $9,000 plus parts. And the learning curve you think is free. He bristled. Then let his shoulders drop. Fine. We loaded the bags into the F-350. The vinyl letters gleamed in the morning light. People keep asking what happened. Ethan said. Tell them we're planting. I answered. That's all they need to hear. He looked at me like measuring years. Not distance. And if it works, then we'll have good problems. I said. At the farm. Lena called from the porch. Are we going organic? We're going accurate. I said. By night. The seed waited in the shed, like quiet promise. The lease and bills were done. The house exhaled. Spring came cautious. Caroline warned. Don't chase calendars, chase conditions. We started under a pale sky. Checking grease. Depth. And patience. Ethan filmed instead of focusing. I told him clouds were racing us. He learned that doing it right often means stopping before you want to. Rent came late. Report didn't. He ordered seed without asking. I canceled it. A deputy arrived about a lockout. Another misunderstanding. No one's locked out. I told him. Just kept from bad decisions. The rain broke our rhythm. Ethan posted quotes about sweat-growing crops. I bit my tongue. Then, headlights in the South Patch tractor, stuck deep. We pulled it free before dawn. Don't prepay for mistakes. I said. When the county assessor arrived. Paperwork told the truth. I was the owner. He, the tenant. Ethan confessed later. I called her. I felt like I was fading. You aren't 12. I said. Fear isn't a plan. I gave him 2 envelopes: stay and share profit. Or leave, and start clean. He chose to leave in June. By May. The rows stood even. He sold his truck. Rode with Herrera. And learned quietly. On their last day? Lena hugged me. I was angry because I was scared. Scared is fine. I said. Just don't let it drive. After they left, the farm felt itself again. I sent thank yous. Paid taxes. And watched the fields green under morning light. When Ethan returned with Herrera, he didn't film. He just asked. Where do you want me? Right here. I said. Watch. Then drive. Then watch again. The day went on, the ordinary kind that proves what you mean by doing it.